Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are continuing with the Path to Developers of December 2021 and we're going into some more aviation stuff. Because of the length and the general look of a lot of these articles, I've decided to split them into multiple videos, with the first few already coming out, and today we're going to be doing the same thing. So this time, instead of just looking at one vehicle, what we're going to be doing is looking at three. So we will be having a look at the Gripen series of aircrafts, we'll have a look at the F-111K for Britain, and also the Chengdu J-5A for China. And I'll leave little timestamps in the description, so if you are only interested in one of those vehicles, make sure to click them, and well, let's get into them. The first vehicle is for Britain, and it's the F-111K Merlin. Now, this vehicle technically never really went anywhere, was never in service, and was never even fully built. So it's a little bit of an odd one to pass to the devs, but oh well. We've had literal fake ships pass to the devs the last few months, so it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. The F-111K is an interesting vehicle, obviously from American descent to start with, but it's actually born out of another failed project from Britain, and this was of course the TSR-2. So in 1964, the TSR-2 was in trouble. Costs were ridiculously high, and generally the government at the time was deeply concerned with the project itself. Despite promising to keep the TSR-2 going to provide job security to the aerospace industry, the Labour government also was seriously considering purchasing some F-111s from General Dynamics in America. In the end, there was an offer from the US government, and the TSR-2 program was pretty much just shut down. So that year, a group of RAF, basically a technical team from them, along with the Deputy Chief of Air Staff, took a trip to Fort Worth General Dynamics site with the intent of the UK joining the F-111 program. And in the end, it was decided that the UK would take on 10 F-111As as an interim vehicle until a new variant would be created, which would be specifically made for the UK. And the general reason for this was because there was a lot of systems that the UK used, which they wanted put into the F-111, which weren't available. So the F-111A that they decided to take on was actually deemed unsuitable for the RAF, so instead they quickened the project towards the F-111K, which was what it was going to be called. This was a retooled F-111 for British Ordnance, so it would be able to carry stuff like the WE-177, the Martels, and also British bombs, and also it would be more designed for the British doctrine at the time, which meant that instead of having a co-pilot, you would have a navigator, and also the ability to install the British recon pack into the vehicle itself, on top of stuff like the British refueling probe, which was mounted in front of the cockpit. And then also, obviously, a few other changes as well. Now, the cost of this was quite high. The original cost per unit was predicted at 1.15 million. This was pounds. However, this crept up to 2.125 million, and then an additional 500,000 for fitting the UK systems. And in 1967, so 3 years later, this had risen to 2.95 million. But this was seen as acceptable, and I'll tell you why it was seen as acceptable. So just to give you an idea, right? So the F-111K, they wanted to order 50 of them overall, right? At a cost of 2.95 million, right? So that gives you a total cost of £147,500,000. And so that would be like the cost of everything. Just to give you an idea of the cost of the TSR-2, right, and the reason why it was actually deemed unsuitable was because they were funneling money due to not just government issues, but also incompetence from the aerospace industry. The TSR-2 at cost of actual development was already at £125 million, and it was projected that a full order of the thing would cost £750 million. So That is quite a lot more than the 150 million that they would be spending on the F-111 project, which they already knew worked because of the fact that it had been in service with America for a decent time. And all they had to do was put in the British systems. So that is why it was seen as acceptable compared to the TSR-2, when the TSR-2 was a ridiculously expensive machine, and it wasn't just because of government incompetence. I really hate that narrative from the vehicle, because there was a lot of other factors involved as well. Anyway, an order of 50 planes was made for the F-111K, and it was placed with General Dynamics. But there was some pushback from this. There was areas of the Ministry of Aviation that put forward other proposals, such as a Spey-engined Mirage, and also a further development of the Buccaneer, which would have been hilarious. Definitely not an out-of-date aircraft by that point. All this led to a reduction in the order, so from 50 to 37, so it would have been even cheaper than I just went through. And then, unfortunately, something happened, which isn't really the F-111's fault. The British decided to withdraw from the east of the Suez. So this basically meant that this changed Britain's role and reduced the need for a long-range bomber drastically. So the F-111K wasn't really needed at that point. So despite this, they still fought to keep the project to operate in Europe rather than the Far East. But there was a vote in Parliament, and it was decided that they weren't going to buy the F-111Ks. And therefore, 2 airframes in a semi-complete state were built, but that was basically it. So, unfortunately, the F-111K never actually got to fruition. It was never fully built, never fully finished, and that is pretty much the story of it. So the idea of having it in the game would be a little bit ridiculous. So in principle, because obviously it was never built, the F-111K Merlin was a modified F-111A with aspects of the FB-111 and some odd British things in it, mainly down to its refueling boom, its avionics package, and also the armament it would be able to carry. It would still have the Pratt & Whitney TF30P100 turbofans, which obviously would make it go pretty quick. It could go Mach 2.5, and then it had 9 hard points on the vehicle, and it would be able to carry a bunch of bombs or Martels or even nuclear armament at the end of the day. The Chinese also get the PLAAF Chengdu J-5A Nightfighter. What the J-5A is a licensed production of the radar-equipped MiG-17PF. It was put into mass production in 1965, and there are over 300 J-5As which were actually built. It's obviously very similar to the J-5. The major difference with it is the radar attached, also making it a night fighter. In the 1950s to 1960s, China urgently needed an all-weather J-5A fighter, and the heavy responsibility was handed over to Chengdu Aircraft Manufacturing Plant. At the time of production, there was a period of economic hardship in the country, and the fixed amount of grain was only 21 kilos per person per month. So Tujida led the design team, and he was 1.78 meters tall, but he was only 50 kilos thin, yet he successfully worked on the project and created the high-quality aircraft which the country needed. The design drawings of Tujida account for 60% of the whole machine, and after 15 months of hard work, a full set of design drawings and materials were issued, and the trial production began for the vehicle. In November, the J-5A made its first flight. The Minister of the 3rd Aircraft Department happily praised the machine, saying that the J-5A was the birth machine of the Chengdu Aircraft Manufacturing Plant. And on the 29th of May 1959, the captain of the 18th Division Air Force Interceptor Group, successfully shot down a B-17G in the J-5A. From July to October of 1958, it actually was able to shoot down 2 F-84Gs and 6 F-86Fs, and it was actually used in many different operations. Also, in April 1956, during the Vietnam War, 4 F-4 Phantoms actually invaded Chinese airspace on Hainan Island, and during the interception of an F-4 Phantom, the F-4 launched the AIM-7 Sparrow at the J-5A, but the J-5A turned and dodged the missile. The same AIM-7 flew into an F-4 Phantom and actually shot it down. The J-5A has a very similar armament to other vehicles that you'll be used to, like the J-2 and the J-4. It has one 37mm cannon and two 23mm cannons. It also had access to two 250-kilo bombs if it wanted to, and also the radar was the Izumrud radar, which it used at the time. The Swedish edition for this month is the JAS-39 Gripen. This is, of course, built by Saab, and the article goes through 3 separate variants, the A, C, and E, and also has a typo in the first sentence, calling it the JAS-37 instead of the JAS-39. Which it is. The Gripen is an interesting aircraft for Sweden, and also, at least to me, is more well known for losing constantly to the F-35 when it comes to trying to sell it to foreign markets, which is always quite fun to read about. But anyway, let's get into what the Gripen is. The development of the Gripen started in the late 70s, when the Swedish government issued a need to replace the Draken and the Viggen, which were showing their age at the time. The plane needed to have the best qualities of the Draken and the Viggen, and then some, capable to take off from small airstrips, and also compatible with the BAS-90 system, which was a defensive tactic which was used from small airfields. It also needed a longer range. There was many planes considered, but the choice fell upon building a new plane of their own instead of buying or importing stuff from other countries. The development started in 1979 and was the first Swedish plane classified with the prefix JAS, J being for fighter, A being attacker, and S being for recon. It was truly designed as a multi-role fighter. The plane could fill more than one role in the same mission without needing to have any modification on the vehicle itself. The Gripen was born in partnership between many different Swedish vehicle industries, the main being Saab Scania, but also Volvo Flygmotor, LM Ericsson, Svenska Radioaktiebolaget, Bolaget, and also Forsvarets Fabriksverk. And the design was a lightweight, single-engine delta wing with a canard configuration plane, and the design itself was approved in 1982 and then 5 prototypes were produced, 30 production planes were then ordered. The Gripen was then on the floor. Initially, using a modified Viggen as a testbed for the avionics and control, the Gripen itself didn't fly before 1988, but the first prototype unfortunately was shown to be kind of unstable and actually crashed in 1989. The cause was identified as a pilot-induced oscillation, and the need to improve the plane was required before going into full production. The Gripen had a negative stability. The control of the plane was pretty difficult without proper software or a very skilled pilot. But a new problem which came around was another plane also crashed. A second plane of it crashed in the middle of an air show where the prototype was being displayed. This time it was seen as a human error instead of a plane error. So obviously had a bit of a rough start, and in 1994 5 prototypes and 2 pre-production planes were completed, and in 1995 Saab had built an agreement with BAE to export the plane to other countries. This was the first stage of setting it up to be ready. The Gripen went into service with Sweden in 1996 and is still currently in service with Sweden. It's also exported to a few other countries in the world, and also they continue to try and sell it to other countries while competing against stuff such as the F-16 and also, of course, the F-35. Generally, when we have a look at the vehicle itself, it has three separate main variants. It has the JAS 39A. This is the initial production plane, which was in service in 1996. It had 8 hardpoints and could carry pretty much anything you would want. So, obviously, air-to-air missiles, some smart bombs, anti-ship missiles if you wanted to put them in, obviously countermeasures, and even additional guns on the vehicle itself. When it comes to the C variant, this is a NATO-compatible variant, which is capable of carrying NATO armament and also able to refuel in the air. It also had 8 hardpoints, so you would be able to take any of the NATO armaments with it, which would include stuff like Mark 82 bombs, GBU-12s, Mavericks, and even stuff like the RBS-15Fs. The JS-39E is an improved version of the Viggen. The Gripen. It has a more powerful engine, the F-414G engine. It has the Raven ES-05 AESA radar, an increased fuel capacity and payload on the vehicle as well, and also 2 additional hardpoints and a few other improvements. This is the most modern variant of the Viggen, and probably the more interesting one. It has one 27mm Mauser BK-27 revolver cannon, has 120 rounds on it. It can carry Meteor missiles, Key PDs, RBS-15Fs. It can carry Sidewinders, Darters. It can also carry all different types of things, everything you would want from a modern day fighter. So this thing could really pave the way and would be basically the top of the Swedish tech tree. There is nothing more than this. So once this gets added, that will pretty much be the end for when it comes to Sweden. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Professor X 1718, Orange Tail, Sakoshi Tiger, BRFC 15, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe A, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, and then Kyle Kin, Barine, Lafouche, and also Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.